What would you do with a treehouse full of gold? Would you use the gold to pay for a holiday? Would you buy the best entertainment you could find? Would you sit on a princess's head? Finn and Jake attempt all these things and more in the episode Furniture and Meat. This is also the episode where we discover Wildberry Princess has a ruthless streak. Never cross Wildberry Princess. More importantly, Jake has an unexpected character arc where his go-with-the-flow nature leads him to spend his gold in increasingly disturbing ways. In narrative terms, this could be called Jake's corruption arc, a narrative technique described by K.M. Wayland as one where a character who is good consciously chooses darkness. More on that later. Anyway, in the beginning, Jake mostly just wants meat, and how far could you fall from there?
I'm gonna need you to put your friends on meat hooks, hang them from the ceiling, and I want you to start carving those babies up.
The episode opens with BMO pretending to be Robin Hood. Then the weight of Finn and Jake's gold is so heavy it breaks open a wall of their treehouse. They decide to solve the problem by spending all their money on a holiday in Wildberry Princess's domain. The moment they arrive, they get in trouble for dumping money in a public fountain. When they bribe the guard to turn a blind eye, it inspires them to start paying random passers-by to do random things for them, like buying them meat. Jake is far more excited than Finn. After getting a random passerby to dance for his amusement, as Jake puts it, it's time to push this thing further. Naturally, this involves breaking into the home of a random couple, offering them money for doing things, from sleeping in positions they hate to literally eating gold coins. At this point, Finn suggests it's gone too far. Jake's response, it's mutual and free market. This episode isn't exactly subtle with its theme. Finn does get Jake to agree to get rid of the money, but Jake's master plan involves breaking into Wildberry Princess's palace to offer her all their money if she lets Jake sit on her head in a tiny stool he apparently specially prepared for the occasion. Wildberry Princess's response is to order their execution. Just as Finn and Jake are about to be encased in molten gold, BMO swoops in as Robin Hood to rescue the now poor heroes, and it all ends happily ever after. Wildberry Princess even offers to abandon her plans to execute them as long as she gets a written apology. According to Superstructure by best-selling author James Scott Bell, every compelling story has death stakes, which means the character faces either physical death, professional death, or psychological death. What counts as psychological death? According to Bell, in such cases, the main battle is inside the lead. If he doesn't make it, it will be like dying on the inside. The entertainment of Furniture and Meat comes from the slow-moving train wreck caused by Jake's decision to misuse his wealth. It starts small, with him laughing at how he can make a dancer leap to his every whim, and spirals out of control with him attempting to buy a place sitting on the head of someone who can have him encased in molten gold. Through Finn's point of view, we see how much using his wealth corrupts Jake, to the extent it will be the death of the heroic Jake that Finn knows and loves, unless something wrenches Jake off his amoral path. So it's potentially the psychological death of Jake as a hero.
Everything in my moral code is telling me that this is wrong.
Baby, we make our own moral code.
When Jake ticks off Wildberry Princess, it's also potentially the physical death of both Jake and Finn, and this really highlights the crux of the episode. Jake's ability to use his gold to get whatever he wants warps his perception of others. Why would some random couple in Wildberry Kingdom want to sleep on new positions in their bed just to entertain Jake? Jake doesn't care, they want his money, right? It's mutual. Why would Wildberry Princess want Jake to sit on her head? Jake doesn't care, except this princess doesn't care about his money, and making demands requires a position of power. When Jake flaunted his gold to random citizens, he was able to leverage the power that gold had over them. The problem was he didn't have any power over Wildberry Princess with or without his gold. This descent into irrational and overly selfish thinking also fits the narrative device known as the corruption arc. K.M. Wayland has a whole section on the corruption arc in her book Creating Character Arcs. Wayland's basic summary of the arc is simple. Character sees truth, rejects truth, embraces lie. In Furniture and Meat, Finn tries to talk Jake out of using his money in increasingly unhinged ways. The irony is, Jake agrees he needs to stop. Jake tells Finn he agrees he's gone too far, but by that point he's too far off in the deep end to let go of his new lie. The lie that enough money can get you literally anything you want. That's why he thinks he can solve his problems by paying the last of his gold to Wildberry Princess. Let's return to the expanded version of the Wayland quote we started with. Wayland argues that the tragedy of the corruption arc is that it features a character who is good, or at least has great potential for goodness, but throws away that chance and consciously chooses darkness. In this case, however, Jake doesn't really stop to consciously think about what he's doing, which fits his personality as a go-with-the-flow kind of dog. So we can call this a slight variation of the typical corruption arc. However, as a final point, this episode is in the style of classic episodic cartoons or sitcoms, where no matter how wacky a character gets over the course of the episode, by the next episode they're back to their old self. I suppose the logic here is that since Jake did spend all his gold, it can't corrupt him anymore. So Jake's character arc is crammed into about 10 minutes and doesn't really feed into his character development for the rest of the show. However, I do think it was a pretty entertaining look at how greed and power can slowly corrupt someone who isn't overthinking things and who is kidding themselves that as long as someone does what they're paid to do, it must be a-okay or mutual. In other words, this episode was not so much about Jake's greed. It was more about how wealth and the power that goes with it can lead to the dehumanizing treatment of others and to unhealthy extremes. If you enjoyed my thoughts on Jake's terrifying showdown against a sentient royal bunch of berries, you can help the channel by liking and subscribing. I really enjoy writing these scripts, and I'll keep releasing new niche videos about Adventure Time's storytelling when I can. Thank you to those of you who've subscribed already. Have a great week, embrace the weird, and thank you for watching! And if I'm honest, Finn is the type to write a heartfelt apology letter to Wildberry Princess, but Jake's the type to forget. And yet, Wildberry Princess isn't the type to forget. And perhaps in time, she got her revenge. Never cross Wildberry Princess.